Welcome back to my CD series where I show off my collection, give a review of the album and the CD, and just two metal albums, one pop album. Let's get this shit started. This next CD was a gift to me by my friend James. So, thank you, James. He's probably not watching this because at this point no one watches my CD videos, but you know what? Fuck it, we ball. But the first album we're going to be looking at is Life is But a Dream by Avenged Sevenfold. Bit of a controversial record. This came out this year, and I gotta say, it's one of my favorite Avenged Sevenfold records. Let me just say that off the fucking bat. But this is the back. It looks a bit simplistic, kind of like a kid drew it with marker, but still cool nonetheless. This is the album art itself, which I think is really cool. Alright, time to crack open the inside, and if you told me this album was a death metal album, I would have believed you. Okay, well, we got this. This is some really cool art, but it says up here, what's this? Tap phone here. I actually have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. If anyone has this album and can tell me, like, what I would need to get this little thing, because like I said, it says tap phone here. So if you have like the specific phone that it needs, or you know what it would need, please let me know, because I really want to see this shit. First part of the booklet, there's that, then this little guy with the skull. I'm really liking the art here. It reminds me a lot of something I'd seen like a death metal record. So it's just lyrics, which, you know, always appreciated. But this also means that it's probably just going to be lyrics, and ooh, they gave us some art with the lyrics. Gotta love it when they put in lyrics and art. God, I hope my fucking song parody career goes off without a hitch so I can make booklets. No clue what I'd put in them, but I want booklets. And a little guy with the horse. Alright, let's see what this CD looks like. I gotta say, the boys, the Sevenfold boys really did good with this. It's, you know, played a lot differently than I've seen more bands do it. So you know what? I mean, it's a digipack, but honestly, I can kind of forgive them for how they did it. This design may be a little flawed. This is not feeling like closing. I mean, it's gonna be like on a shelf anyways, enclosed by other CDs, so it's not a big deal. But still, this is kind of annoying, just to have it kind of like constantly open. But, I mean, it doesn't really hinder my opinion of it in any way. So, yeah, good CD.
Life is But a Dream is Avenged Sevenfold's 8th album and latest release as of 2023. This album has a pretty messy past as it began recording in 2018 but was released 5 years later. But this was mostly due to COVID-19 and the pandemic. After the pandemic was pretty much over, Avenged Sevenfold got back to work to finish the album. Much of the lyrics on this album are similar to The Stage in the sense of life being a simulation and AI will be our overlords when they gain sentience. But the actual lead-up on this album was done in the form of an ARG. The band's social media account was hacked and began claiming that tours that the band were going to was going to be cancelled, and a Reddit user by the name LIBAD5343 was this supposed hacker, as he made a post of the band's subreddit with an image of him being inside the Avenged Sevenfold Twitter account. On top of that, he made a previous post, once again to the band's subreddit, saying that he had the record before it was released and he pretty much asked for help on how to leak the album. One of the clues found in the ARG led to the music video, which had LIBAD5343 presents Nobody written on it. People were told to be there on March 6, 2023 at midnight. Then, as the hunt was completed, we were given an unlisted YouTube video with a countdown. As the clock finished, we were graced with the lead single, Nobody. Truthfully, once I listened to Nobody, I wasn't really a fan of it. Maybe because it was my first blast of anything considered avant-garde metal, aside from System of a Down. The biggest problem with this album as a whole, even if it doesn't personally bother me too much, is Matt's declining voice. He lacks the grit to this voice that he had in Hail to the King and before, and it does sound like he's struggling to hit higher notes at times, especially in Nobody. But luckily, he doesn't really sound like he's straining himself too much. I felt like there were more moments in the stage where Matt was trying too hard to do something he couldn't do with his voice, but it sounds like he recognized his boundaries and mostly respected them on this album. But this track list is fucking stacked. It's only 11 songs, which is kind of the norm for Avenged Sevenfold album lengths, but the songs weren't as long as I was expecting. Avenged Sevenfold has a reputation for usually having one absurdly long song on an album, have it be either Save Me on Nightmare or the 15-minute song Exist on the Stage. The longest song in here is Cosmic, only being 7 minutes long, but there is a trio trio of songs, which is G, Ordinary, and Death, and Matt stated that all 3 songs were written as one song but was recorded into 3. Matt also said how he wanted to live out the album's theme, so he took a psychedelic drug that I'm not even gonna fucking try to read the name of that, and it led to him being in the deepest depression he'd ever been in. But the actual tracks are pretty interesting. I remember when a friend asked me what I was listening to and I sent them Game Over, and they were fucking jump scared by the blast of thrash as this folk-inspired intro ended. Even if it wasn't the lead single, Game Over serves as a perfect opener to this album's sound and themes. The verses are performed so weirdly, being a mix of spoken word and rough vocals. Then the bridge hits, and the phrase "as it may" repeats around you like you're being circled around and taunted with the phrase. Mattel is the second song, and it instantly jumps in with a droning riff into the verses. The Rev, the band's original and now deceased drummer, wrote the bridge melody that ended up being used in Mattel. It's really cool seeing the band use older material and incorporating it into their newer sound. Ordinary is a strangely perfect song that I wasn't expecting to like nearly as much as I do. I hear the song get compared to Daft Punk a lot. Personally, I just don't really hear it, aside from the fact it's a disco electro song. I guess that means any electro disco song ever written is a Daft Punk sound-alike. There's only a select few songs I'm not a fan of, but that should be expected given the eclecticism and weirdness of this album. Not all of it stuck for me, unlike some of the other tracks. Beautiful Morning is just a bit too slow for this album, even if I do like the pop section vocally performed by Sinister Gates, which is really cool to see. Also, some of the lyrics written for Beautiful Morning was written by the Rev as well. Other duds for me is like Easier, Death, and the title track. While I can definitely respect the songs, personally they just don't hit for me as much as the others do. Although I do really like the composition and instrumentation done for Death, I just don't really have that much to speak on for Easier. Life is But a Dream is the longest wait ever for Avenged Sevenfold release, and they pulled it off what they were trying to do perfectly. The band clearly doesn't want to go back to their dad rock, self-titled, or nightmare sound, and I think the biggest people with a dislike for Avenged Sevenfold can at least respect the effort they put in for an experimental album. I give Life is But a Dream a 90 out of 100. As I said before, Avantgarde isn't usually in my rotation, but it's given me an interest in the genre, even if this album isn't akin to traditional Avantgarde metal.
Alright, next album I have is a gift from my mom, Follow the Leader by Korn. They gave timestamps. So this is the back. They gave timestamps for the songs. I've only seen Andrew WK do that in his I Get Wet CD, which is always nice. And there's the back art. Then here's the front art. So this is the CD. Nothing too much going on there. There's some art, but you have to I have to show it off in a way. Yeah, as you can see, it's quite literally just the album art, and exact same thing for behind the CD. Just the album art, and the back of the CD cover is also just that. I do like the art so far. Who did the art for this album? Ooh, hoo, hoo. Ooh, hoo, hoo. We get one of these, baby. I love these kinds of CDs. So yeah, pictures of the band, and then whatever kind of BDSM strap that is. See, this is mostly just lyrics, always appreciated, of course. Then it says, join the Korn fan club. What is this? Either sign up at our website or www.korn.com, or fill out below, put it in an envelope, and send the address on the other. One thing I hate about these, that's the one thing that I don't like about these kinds of booklets, is I always have a difficult time folding them back the way they should be. Alright, so that was Follow the Leader by Korn.
Follow the Leader is Korn's third album and the band's most successful album to date. This album, and so did Korn's previous albums, helped popularize the nu metal subgenre into the mainstream. Unlike some other nu metal, this album has a very prominent hip-hop influence, especially in songs like Children of the Corn, All in the Family, and Camatosis that feature hip-hop artists. The recording for this album was drug-filled, and they partied a lot as well. Vocalist Jonathan Davis specifically mentioned "It's On" and said while he was recording vocals, there was literally sex all around him. Unironically enough, this is the album that JD was mostly sober from meth, opting to drink alcohol and do cocaine instead. Over $60,000 was spent on alcohol during the production, and it doesn't help that JD was also physically abused by Korn's ex-producer and now vocal coach for John Davis, Ross Robinson. According to Robinson, he'd hurt JD while he was performing vocals so that he knew he wasn't holding back.
Ross Robinson will also produce other nu metal albums, such as albums from Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, and Sepultura. The tracks can vary widely in quality, and it's pretty rounded out from mediocre to good tracks. While there aren't any songs I actively dislike on this album, there are some that'll just be on a playlist. My favorite tracks on this album are the more hip-hop/rep center tracks, mostly from being the before-mentioned tracks. If you saw my music hot take short, you would know that I am particularly a fan of rap metal more than standard hip-hop, and while I don't find Jonathan Davis to be a great rapper, he's good at flowing his lyrics along to the groovy hip-hop inspired riffs. One thing I like about this album is that you can actually hear the fucking bass guitar. I am so used to hearing the bass being so quiet in music to the point where it's barely even noticeable, and I really like it when the bass is audible enough to be distinguished. I mean, my favorite song of all time isn't Feel Gooding for Nothing. Bass itself has some funk elements to it, which I also enjoy quite a bit, even if funk metal isn't a genre that I actively listen to. My biggest problem with this album is that the choruses are pretty underwhelming. At worst, they can bog down a song quite a bit, but at best, it doesn't really add much to the song. Maybe it's because I'm more used to clean vocals for my metal choruses, but JD's voice just doesn't really do it for me for good hooks. Now, I must say, this is the second Korn album I've listened to. As I listen to more Korn albums, I may come to appreciate this album more, and I certainly do like it for a second look at the band. Jonathan Davis' silly fucking beatboxing and some of the songs probably are some of the better parts of this album. This album as a whole is a pretty interesting mix of genres, have it be the funky bass, the groovy riffs, or aggressive to rap vocals. It's still an entertaining listen, even at its worst. I give Follow the Leader an 78 out of 100. It's a good album by all means, but definitely has its moments of mediocrity and greatness too.
Alright, last album we got ourselves, Midnight by Set It Off. Here's the front. Shit. Here's the back. Not really sure, is that just a door or a window? Neither, it's a building or some shit. Here is like the blue color they went for this album, the kind of dark atmosphere, quote unquote dark. Well, I gotta say, it's Midnight, goddammit! Booklet so far, it's the album but without the title and all that, so that's cool. And then the exact same as the book. Only problem with like how dark it is it's kind of hard to show it on the camera. So as far as I'm looking at, it's just lyrics. I'm gonna show one page and then you kind of get the general gist of the rest of the pages. But the last and final page does have a little hourglass, which is really cool. And let's get a look at this CD. Well, they weren't kidding. There's that moon up there. The only problem with this CD is there really isn't a lot to go off of. I mean, this is pretty cool, but I don't know. I kind of like the atmosphere they were going, or the vibe that they went with Elsewhere and a little more and Upside Down, and I guess the better art. Well, Upside Down didn't really have art. They had pictures of the band members, but they didn't really have art.
Midnight is Set It Off's fifth album and was a return to form after the failure of their previous album, Upside Down. In a Reddit AMA, drummer Max Desinger said that this album was going to have influences pulled from all their albums into one album. I think that this is true to some extent, as this album doesn't really have as much rock punk as Cinematics did. The band purposely went into a darker direction in contrast to the light-themed album Upside Down, and Max described it as a transition to Night to Day, which would have corresponded with the album's name, Midnight. The track list on this album is stuffed full of 18 songs, and honestly, it feels like there's a fair bit of filler on this album. There's some songs that really feel empty, even if they are catchy, like Stitch Me Up and Raise No Fool, but that's all they seem to be written for, just to be catchy. And that's fair to some extent, but if it's just one-sided for that purpose, then yeah, it's gonna get boring. But past the fluff are generally great songs that are some of the best in their discography, like Lonely Dance, No Disrespect, Hourglass, Different Songs, and many more. I really like the funk songs in this album, and honestly, I hope for the day we get a fully funk Set It Off album, but truthfully, this is kind of a forgettable album in their overall discography. It's more memorable than Upside Down, but not by much, even by the enlarged track listing. It's just an overall great album filled with infectious hooks and riffs, but it's not offering much more for outsiders of Set It Off's music. As a big fan of this band, of course I'm gonna love it. I give Midnight a solid 90 out of 100. I just don't have much to dislike about this album. Similarly to Hollywood Undead's Hotel California, it felt like a Set It Off album for Set It Off fans. There definitely is experimentation that was carried over to their next album Elsewhere, but there just isn't as much to compliment about this album because all of the compliments I would have had for this album I've already given to other Set It Off albums.
That is it for this video. If you enjoyed, feedback, criticisms, all that, appreciated. Would love to hear your comments. If you have any different opinions of this album, I would love to hear them all. I try to make these CD videos in particular quite varied, so I can try to appease as many audiences as possible. So I got the 2 metal records and I got fucking Set It Off, because I don't love Korn. I think they're a pretty good band, but I love Avenged Sevenfold and Set It Off, and I try to appease to as many audiences as I can that isn't just my own. But that's it for this video. criticisms, anything, would appreciate it. That's it for this video. See ya.